First album that you bought?
Rolling Stones, Out of Our Heads.
What year is it? 66? 60?
My aunts bought it for me. I think it might have been 65.
65.
Satisfaction was on it, yeah.
And why did you want to have this album?
Well, I was a huge Beatles fan and a Stones fan when I was a little boy, at the age of 4 or 5, and enamored by them, like every kid was at the time. And so it was a Saturday, and my aunts said, "We'll take you to the Five and Dime, to Woolworths or Grant's, wherever you bought records in those days. You know, what we used to call a Five and Dime, and we'll buy you an album or 6 45s, and because there were always 12 songs on an album back in those days, and so they gave me a choice, and it was about the same price. 45s were probably 39 cents, and albums were probably $1.99, you know, whatever. But so I picked Out of Our Heads because of Brian Jones, you know, and specifically his face and the Stones' music. But I mean, Brian Jones was my Stone, John Lennon was my Beatle.
Why Brian Jones?
Because he looked the coolest with the bangs. You know, I mean, bangs are the sexiest thing in the world, and you know, he was a sexy motherfucker, and I think obviously his self-destruction, not knowing that as a little boy, you know, not knowing that those dark circles, what they meant, you know, to him at the time, but to us it was like this, like dark, little, sexy, tragic fig. Maybe not tragic, it hadn't come into our picture yet, but just cool looking, you know. Yeah. And yeah, I mean, all of them were so odd looking, and Stones and Beatles, you know, and of course the iconic faces at the time. But yeah, so I picked Out of Our Heads, cause and listened to it like a million times, over and over and over again. And then my next record was a Beatles 45. I Should Have Known Better. And I got that. I was speeding down a hill in a go-kart, you know, a homemade go-kart, and the go-kart stopped, and I didn't. So I went flying off the go-kart and landed and got a stone embedded in my arm, a sharp stone all the way into my elbow. I still have the scar, actually. And so I was a brave little boy, and when they pulled the stone out and got my stitches, and my parents said, "Oh, we'll stop and you can buy a Beatles record." And I was, you know, like, yay, you know, hurt me more, you know, yeah. Maybe that was the beginning of my problem. Okay. And yeah, so that was the first two records.
And the Stones album, I just have to adjust your mic because it's a little bit, it's scratching.
Mm-hmm.
No, it's good. Stones album. Any specific songs that you?
Oh yeah.
That you liked?
Yeah. All
of them, or?
I can name them. The Last Time, obviously, is on it. West Coast Promo Man, Under Assistant West Coast Promo Man, Spider and the Fly, Play with Fire. I mean, I think every song on the record, It's All Right, it ends with a live version of It's All Right. I mean, it's just a fucking masterpiece.
Do you still like the Stones?
Of course. How could you not love them, adore them? You know, as long as that beat is there, you know what I mean? Is Charlie and Keith playing together, you know, I mean, and mix the fucking gravy, right? But, you know, yeah, I mean, not only are they're still going, but it's fun. They're still funny. They're not pretentious old, you know, farts. And they're funny, and they always have been. And I think they've aged beautifully. I'd say God bless them, man. I hope they tour until they fucking fall apart.
What do you think of their last single?
I liked it.
Yeah.
I didn't buy the record. It's the last, when that came out, I was in a real whirlwind, and I still am. And I've got to catch up with it, yeah. But I liked what I heard and the vibe around the single as well. The artwork looked really cool too. And, you know, I think Jagger, you know, he keeps his eye on pop aesthetics, you know. And it's in much the same way Robert Plant does. Even Robert Plant even more scientifically, and like he should have a doctorate of, you know, roots musicology and world music. And I think Jagger does that like in a way like more like Bowie on a pop culture scale more so than Robert's a little bit more, you know, deeper with into the roots of the South and from North Africa and everything else. But anyway, yeah, it's a matter of coming to grips with these guys you were growing up with, and they were your heroes when you were a little boy. Now, I mean, you could call them old men, but now I'm becoming an old man too, like not too far behind them.
Yeah.
So it's like watching them cut a path in, you know, I guess uncharted waters, you know, the first white rock stars to reach 75 and 80 years old. And see how, if you can still do it gracefully and learnedly, like Bob Dylan, still as intelligent as ever. Robert Plant seems to be growing all the time, you know, so it's inspiring, you know.
But don't you think that the Stones now, they have aged gracefully, but maybe 10 or 15 years ago there was something, sometimes people said, well, Mick Jagger, why are you running around in let's say, jumper suits, stuff like that, but now he is accepted for it. But don't you think that it was a few years ago, it was a bit...
It's cyclical. It's with bands like the Stones and AC/DC and even James Brown when he was alive. It's the kind of music that's constantly there, but every 7 or 8 years, maybe 10 years, it gets a moment again, where their aesthetic matches what's racing by at that time, and it pops its head up at the right time. And all those artists, I mean, AC/DC can go 10 years and you hardly hear a peep, and a record comes out and you don't go see the tour or something, and then 2 records later something happens where you have to see that tour, you know, because there's some kind of thing happening.
Yeah, there was the same thing with, like you were saying, the early 90s with Thunderstruck from the Razor's Edge, from AC/DC, that put him up again.
Yeah.
You were saying John Lennon too, your favorite Beatle. What makes him for you special?
Because he was caustic, you know, he was fun. He was a wise guy, smart ass, you know, and it was so refreshing to have someone poking, and he was clever, you know. I think he had a very poetic sense to his you know, even his presence was poetic and very playful when he was young. And all the Beatles are very playful, the way they played off each other, very charismatic. But he was the one that was like I mean, it's hard to say because they're all fucking witty. They were just, you know, that magical combination that happens when, you know, 4 of these guys get together and it just something that happens, electricity happens. And they had that. And you know, Lennon especially, you know, just...
If he wouldn't have been murdered, what do you think, what would he do? How would he be? What sort of role? Because you know, Mick Jagger, you have Paul McCartney, let's say the symbols from the 60s. And Keith Richards, of course. What would John Lennon be? What would he be doing? Would he still be making music? Or?
I think we'd be really surprised by what he'd be doing. You know, I think he you know, who knows? And I'm sure he'd still be making music, and I think he'd probably be going off on weird tangents like he used to. I mean, you can't shed that kind of trait, you know. If you marry Yoko Ono, you know, you have that trait and you want to keep it alive. And so I think he could have went anywhere with his politics, his music, and it's a shame because it would have been wonderful to watch. You know, we lost a lot of intelligence.